everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at Spidey comics from December of 1986.
That's right, and unfortunately, G.I. Joe Lee could not be with us, but Bex Luthor is with us.
Don't really. Bex. I'm here. I'm here for filler week. It's filler week here on Here Comes the Spider-Cast. Yeah, it's never sure filler week, ever. It's always
no way. Week. It's always good stuff. That's why we got Michelle Kistner back with us. Thank you for joining us, Michelle.
Yeah.
Woo! And just to quickly refresh everyone's memory, you're from Movie Sleuth.
Yes.
Yes. So the best way to find you is just moviesleuth.com, or what's your name on all of the different platforms?
You can add me on Facebook, Michelle Kistner. I'm on Instagram as Robot Cookie. I don't have a Twitter because I despise Twitter.
Me too.
So those are like the two main things. If you search my name on Google, you can find all my reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you again for joining us.
Oh yeah, no problem. It's awesome.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, we're going to start off this week with Web of Spider-Man 21, and Josh, you're going to tell us all about this one.
Sure.
You sound so happy about it.
Sure. So we catch up with Peter, and he's on some boat? Sort of ferry on his way to Dublin, from Liverpool to Dublin, and he's under the radar, feeling under the weather. Like he's not feeling too well. He's with Joy Mercado. They're in the UK and they're dealing with all of these terrorist attacks that are going on, and they're they've been sent there by Now magazine, right? That's what.
Right.
Yeah. To cover this, and then Peter starts daydreaming while on the ferry, and we cut to a completely different story that has nothing to do with what's going on besides the fact that Peter is sick. But we start off this Inception story where it's a story inside of a story with this guy's being mugged in an alleyway, and Spider-Man's there, and we believe that he's gonna jump down and stop these goons, but it turns out that he's working with the bad guys. What's going on? It's somebody pretending to be Spider-Man and committing crimes. So we cut back to Peter. He's sick and he's talking to MJ, and her and Aunt May are kind of taking care of him. We cut over to these two guys that are pretending to be Spider-Man and working together to commit crimes as they rob a jewelry store, and the police show up and they see Spider-Man come out, and they're kind of confused, what's he doing? Why is he stealing jewelry? That can't be Spider-Man. And then the partner uses a zip line and goes over to the building, and it looks like Spider-Man is swinging away. So the police believe that this really is him. So J. Jonah Jameson obviously is thrilled by this news that everybody thinks that Spider-Man is a bad guy now. So he's kind of celebrating and running all of these stories about him. The news is even talking about it on the TV. MJ hears about this. Peter can't really stand for it. So despite the fact that he's sick, he puts on his costume and he swings around the city to kind of investigate to see what's going on. He ends up running into the guy who's pretending to be him, and he tracks him down all the way to his apartment, figures out that it's two guys, and he long story short, he busts into the apartment eventually, and it turns out that they made a scrapbook of why they're doing this. and he reads the scrapbook, and months ago, Spider-Man failed to save their dad from a bank robbery, and the robbers shot and killed him. So they're taking revenge by using his identity to kind of smear his name and rob banks, I guess. And he ends up chasing these guys and following them down to an island tram. So it's like a giant, like, how would you
thing.
Yeah, it's like a ski lift essentially. It's like transportation to go over the water, and it's like dangling down by like a rope pulley system. So this all kind of comes to a head on this tram as it's floating across, presumably like the Hudson or something, and Spider-Man swings up as the fake Spider-Man is up there. They kind of have a bit of a tussle. It looks like the rope is going to break. Spider-Man saves the day, and everybody is there to witness that there are two Spider-Men. One of them is trying to ruin the day. One of them is trying to save the day. So it ends up kind of clearing Peter's name. Then we cut back over to present day time where Peter and Joy make it off the ferry, and that's pretty much it.
Now before we jump into this, I just have to ask quickly, does anybody here know who Larry Lieber is? He is Stan Lee's brother.
Right.
The less famous, less talented brother of Stan Lee. I feel sorry for the guy, because not only does no one know who he is, Stan Lee has never even mentioned him in an interview. So, yeah, I've never heard you even talk about him. It's kind of weird, you know? But, so anyway, Larry Lieber, he was around since the very beginning, writing and drawing, like, Marvel Comics, but obviously he was never a spectacular artist. He was never a spectacular writer, but he was always there. I personally think the art in this is actually fine. It's kind of like a throwback to the 60s, and I like, the storytelling's clear, and I like the fact... The one thing I love about this issue is it's done in one. It's packed full of dialogue, and, everything is condensed because it's so short, right? 20 pages or whatever it is. I love that. Other than that, we can get into the actual content or the quality of the story later, but yeah, we'll talk about that later. But Michelle, I want to know your impression first. You're a guest. What did you think of this issue?
It was okay. I was kind of laughing because, like, it starts out with a flashback, and then Spider-Man flashes back in the flashback to another flashback. And I'm just like, wow, they really went for it here. I like the idea of Spider-Man feeling like regret. Like, it's not his, it's not his fault that his dad died. It was the criminals, right, that shot him, but he always feels like he can't do enough to save people, or, no matter how much he does, he always very much is taken aback when someone dies or when he can't save everybody, and it weighs heavily on him. And I always imagine thinking, like, if you're a superhero and you save, so hundreds of people's lives, right? Like, how much do you think about those 100 lives at an individual level? I'm sure, he didn't even recognize any of that stuff till, like, his memory was jogged. Like, but every life you save as a superhero means a lot to that person and their family, but it's just like, a day at work for you. So I just thought it was interesting, like, it kind of took it from the, macro level down to the, micro level, like down to, like, it kind of, like, made him laser focus on one life that he himself affected. And I thought that was an interesting kind of way to take it, kind of goofy structure aside.
Okay, so Becca, what was your first impression of it?
I just couldn't. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to Dublin. I forgot that we were going to Dublin, but it did not matter at all.
Nope. So, fill-in time.
I do enjoy that if they're going to do a fill-in, at least it's contained within the main story. It's like, oh, this reminds me. So it's like, okay, we didn't forget where we are in the main plot line. We're just going somewhere else. Because normally they'll just throw a fill-in, and it's like a different artist, a different writer, and it's just like Web of number 19. It's like, well, what does this have to do with Web of? But yeah, at least he doesn't feel good, so it reminds him of the last time he was sick. Which I think Spider-Man being sick is always funny. I like when he has to like wear a hat or a scarf over his costume. It's like, you have regenerative healing powers, but also you can still catch a cold. That's funny to me. No, I liked it. It was for a fill-in issue, is pretty decent actually. I like you said, like the one and done kind of stuff. Normally that bothers me a little bit more than it did here, but it was at least somewhat of a decent story, so it didn't. Normally a lot of these filler one and dones are like garbage from 30 years ago that they were just like,
Right.
oh, just put this in. Like, I think, Josh, you were messaging the group earlier, talking about how, like, last week the fill-in issue was from, like, decades prior to when it was actually published.
That was Mike's.
That was me that was talking
yeah.
about this one. Because if you base it on the fact that... Or was it this one or was it last week?
One of them. But
It
yeah.
was... Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Becca.
At least it doesn't feel so out of place.
Right.
As far as, like, the story goes, I really like Mary Jane in this issue. I actually like her a lot more recently than I have in the past, so that's great. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. It was like, meh. If I didn't read it again, I'd be fine.
So, fun fact: the ferry from Liverpool to Dublin is 7.5 hours.
Oh, really?
How?
So I just pictured Peter in a trance for 7 hours, just like thinking about what happened.
Telling the story.
Joey's just like, yeah, right there, Pete.
7 hours? There was no fast way for them to get there?
I guess not.
I just gonna say quickly because
Yeah.
you touched on it. It was actually Peter Parker 120, the one where he has to deal with those thugs. Remember when his apartment? That one.
The thugs. You'll have to be more specific.
Well, but yeah, they're not super villains. But anyway, based on who's living where, because Glory Grant's in the apartment, it takes place in March 1975. So it was obviously a script they had in the drawer for like 11 years, and they're like, okay, just draw this, Keith Giffen. We'll figure it out later. Whereas this fill-in feels obviously the fact that Spider-Man has his black costume means it was at least drawn recently. But other than that, there's really no way to figure it out, which I kind of like because it's almost more timeless, right? Like, you don't have to worry, like, oh, Aunt May's living at this house. You know, this person's here, this person's there. Flash Thompson's on the run. It's just a generic Spider-Man story that can fit in anywhere, so I kind of like that.
Is that what they do? They just, like, have stories in the back, like, oh, this isn't good enough for a regular run, and then they'll just kind of slide them in where they need time to finish something?
Yeah, like if they're, because back then they were very strict about deadlines. They had to have, like, you know, nowadays there'll be a comic that's a regular series and you'll be like, oh, number 5 is, 7 months late, number 6 is 2 months late. Back then it was every month they had to have it out on time, so they would have comics just in the drawer. They'd be like, okay, well, this is a 20-page story that's already done, now just add on a first page and a last page where Spider-Man has a cold and we'll put it out, And they did that for like 20 years. That's how Marvel got by. And then they stopped doing it eventually. But yeah, so there was a lot of them back then. But so yeah, Josh, what's your general feeling about this? You didn't really give your review yet.
I think it's a fine premise. I like what they're going for. But I think the execution is a little rough. I really dislike a lot of the dialogue. I've said it so many times on this podcast, and I'll say it, I'm sure, plenty more, but I hate when they have to write into the dialogue what's happening instead of just letting us look and see what's happening.
Of course, yep.
The bad guys pretending to be Spider-Man, narrating out loud. It's not like a thought bubble, narrating out loud. The real webhead wouldn't need an iron pipe to break this window.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, we know. They'll all figure it was the real Spider-Man. It's like, yeah, we understand that you're the fake Spider-Man. You don't need to you just told us the page before. You don't need to like reiterate and tell us again that you're doing something bad by pretending to be Spider-Man. You're currently robbing a bank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if we didn't get that beforehand, we would know because we know Spider-Man doesn't rob banks. So I it's stuff like that where I think like an average story kind of gets bumped down.
Sure.
To kind of being a little less fun when it's like it's bogged down by this like unneeded dialogue. It clutters the panels, and I don't know. I'm kind of like on this issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the art quickly. Michelle, what'd you think of the art in this one by Larry Lieber?
It was
Yeah.
like it was serviceable. I guess would be the way to put it. It didn't look bad. Like it wasn't egregiously bad where I was like taken out of the story. It was just like run of the mill, just good enough Spider-Man art that told the story. It wasn't any like panels or anything that really stood out to me like struck composition wise or anything like that. It got the job done.
Did it feel kind of like 1960s ish to you?
Yeah, it definitely, it felt more like retro.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would kind of been like why I thought that was like a purposeful thing because he was thinking about something that happened in the past. But did it say how far back that happened?
It doesn't really say no specifically, no. But I'm gonna assume it's because Larry Lieber obviously is from the 60s, and so is Vince Colletta, the inker. He's also a 60s veteran. So, that's probably why it has that vibe. It's just the way they draw,
It couldn't have been from too far back, only because he's wearing the black cloth suit. Yeah. So I think it's within the technically takes place in the last year or two. But it does, I definitely agree. It does feel like more of a retro story, and even the style of the way things are drawn as well seems a little bit more retro.
Right. Becca, did you like the art?
I'm just like scrolling past, and like there's not one single panel where I was like, oh, cool. Like as I'm scrolling down, it's just like, get it done, tell the story, here's Spider-Man, there he is.
That's true, yes.
Which is unfortunate, because usually a lot of the times at least there's like one or two panels where it's like, this is what the artist was, that's what they wanted to emphasize. But in this, it's just like, I guess he's really good at drawing that gondola. That's like, the cover is sweet. I enjoy the cover. I don't know if you know who drew that cover.
I can find out.
Not important.
It looks like the regular artist for the cover from Webb. Like, feels like it fits within the line of the.
I'll have you know the cover is by a man I've never heard of named Phil Felix.
Shout out to Phil.
I've never heard of this guy. Anyway,
I just like the Spider-Man's fighting. Peter has his spider sense. And the other one just has a blowtorch. Love that.
Right?
Love the blowtorch.
I didn't notice that. Wow, I didn't notice that.
We love a good blowtorch.
The thing is, you're right. There is no panel that sticks out, but I think why I like the art is because, again, it feels like a comic book. It doesn't feel like photoshopped, movie storyboards. It feels like a classic comic book, and for that, I do like it. And it's also, you notice this is not a computer. This is not recolored on a computer. This is the shitty 1980s flexograph, ugly coloring, and that I think is part of its charm. So.
Well, I don't like it.
Okay.
The colors are bad.
Ooh, okay.
And you should feel bad about it.
Ooh, all right. This is
honestly, I think if they got rid of half of the dialogue,
yeah,
we do fine. The page where the mayor is there talking, it's honestly more word bubbles than it is illustration. It's insane.
Yeah.
How my eyes just like glazed over on this page, and I was just like, the mayor, J. Jonah Jameson's happy, and they're hearing it on the news. Okay, moving on.
Yeah,
like I couldn't even get through half of these bubbles. It was just like,
I think there's like an old rule that you should only have like 2 sentences per bubble, and this comic definitely breaks that rule.
I don't know. I think if it's something important that you're trying to say, it's one thing, but it feels like it's like double, triple the amount of words, and you could have said it with far fewer, or even by none at all. Did we need to hear the entire quote from the
good point.
The news anchor, or could we just have MJ go, "Oh my God, Peter, they're talking about you on the news," and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we are currently watching what's happening. We don't need to see the entire segment. Sorry,
100% agree. Yep.
It's Parker time.
It's Parker time. Here.
So, on that note, I mean, I'd love to talk about this comic more, but I think we're going to have to skip to recommendations. So, I surprisingly am going to recommend this one only because it is a done-in-one throwback to the old-style comics. Definitely not essential reading. You could totally survive by not reading this. It's inconsequential. Nothing ever comes back from the story. But I still think it's a fun story. So for that, I recommend it. Michelle, what about you?
I guess I would recommend it. It wasn't particularly bad. I did think it was fun, like, watching him fumble around having a cold, you know, or if it was nowadays, he'd have Rona, you know, so.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, it was just kind of fun because I liked seeing how, like, him being sick kind of affected his powers a little bit, and he was, like, he literally took a nap, like, in the middle of it. Like, he was just like, I'll get them a bit. Fucking made himself a hammock and everything. And I was like, damn! I don't know, that part was kind of fun. And it's, like, weird, like, how he was just, like, so mad that Mary Jane was, like, you know, trying to take care of him. I'm like, bro, man, you should be, like,
right.
now.
So, actually, I think that would place this within the last few months. You saying that actually just made me, because I think he said something about how MJ paid for all of the damages done to his apartment. So that means
you still like a broke joke.
this like recently happened then.
But it's also it's also possible that the comic was written and drawn and they just went in and added in a couple of bubbles, right? But anyway, and Bex Luthor, what about you? Do you recommend this one?
It's okay. I mean, you don't need to read it. It's fine. Read it if you want. I'm not gonna judge, or will I? We'll never know.
Okay, Josh.
Yeah, I think it's it's just fine. I wouldn't recommend it, but I also wouldn't say it's bad either. It's just like the bare minimum of what a Spidey comic is, I think. We've been reading some pretty good ones lately, so this one is like, you could skip this in the run and it wouldn't matter. And I also don't think it's a fun enough one shot where I would like say you've got to read this one. Gotcha.
Okay, enough with that one. Now we're going to jump over to Amazing Spider-Man number 283. And Bex Luthor, are you going to tell us what this one's about?
No.
You're not?
No, absolutely. No, I just was closing some tabs. Sorry. It turns out Larry Lieber is still alive, so good for him. He turns 90 in October.
Oh, cool.
Happy birthday.
Anyway, let's go back to these not filler issues. And you can tell that they're not filler because the beginning of them has something to do with the main ongoing story.
Oh.
That's how you know, right? So, cover on this one's pretty interesting. Got Absorbing Man and Titania, who is the only good thing to ever come out of Secret Wars, besides maybe the black suit, but I'm still on the fence about it. So we start off the issue, and what's his name?
Absorbing Man?
Nope.
No, Flash Thompson.
Flash Thompson. Thank you. I was like, fuck, which white guy from Spider-Man is this? Flash Thompson is still on the run because he was broken out of prison by Jack-O-Lantern. I think. It was Jack-O-Lantern, right?
Yes.
Broke him out because he thought he was the Hobgoblin, but he's not the Hobgoblin. So he's still on the run, and the police are looking for him, and he's talking about how he needs to be brave, like Spider-Man, but he's a coward instead. And then we pan to Spider-Man, who is looking for Flash, and talking about how much he can't wait to give up being Spider-Man, but he can't do that until he finds Flash, because he's been talking about giving up being Spider-Man for the last 6 months.
Exactly. Even longer, I think, yeah.
So Spider-Man hitches a ride on a cop car because he thinks it'll help him find Flash, and he runs into Titania, the strongest woman in the world, apparently. She's robbing a jewelry store. Classic. She throws an entire van at him and gets away, which is just rad. And he follows her. She changes into her civvies, Peter follows her into a hotel room where she meets up with Crusher Creel, the Absorbing Man, and her boyfriend. Turns out they're trying to lay low, but she wanted to rob a jewelry store. And the way that Crusher figures out what she was out doing is he puts his hand in her bag and turns into diamonds, which I enjoyed that. It's a very dramatic way of finding out that your girlfriend's still robbing jewelry stores. So they're talking about how they've joined the Masters of Evil.
Of course.
You know, just subtle group names.
I know, eh?
And how they have to like lay low because they have like a job to do now. And they watch Spider-Man swinging away because obviously he's seen them. So we pan back to the police precinct where the Captain Keating is super ticked off about Flash escaping, and he's got some internal monologue where like he calls all the police stupid and they're never going to understand how much that Flash Thompson's case means to him, which makes me think that Captain Keating is probably somebody.
Maybe he's the Hobgoblin. We don't know.
There's like 6 people who could be the Hobgoblin. I know who is the Hobgoblin, so it's not as fun. But I mean, I can imagine if you read this, it would probably be really fun to try to figure out who it is every week. So Peter does what every good superhero does, and he calls the Avengers hotline and tells them about Absorbing Man and Titania and how they're in a hotel room. And he's like, and then he goes and sells the pictures of Spider-Man fighting Titania to the city editor, and he gets some money from her. And then he runs into Betty Leeds, who has previously been cheating on her husband with Flash Thompson, who was cheating on his girlfriend with Betty. So Peter runs into her, and he's like, oh, why are you so sad? And Ned's like, I don't know, maybe because her husband's leaving her because she cheated on him. And they get into an argument, and I'm just like, Peter, the man's wife cheated on him. He's allowed to be mad at her. But he has to, like, defend her, and for some reason his spider sense is going off, like, oh, Ned must be really angry. That's weird.
Maybe he could be the Hobgoblin. But anyway.
Yeah, so we've got, like, 6 suspects all in this one issue. It's great. And then we pan back over to the hotel room where Absorbing Man and Titania were, and the Wasp is there, and she's the only one there to investigate because, you'll have to read Avengers 274 to find out where the rest of the Avengers are. I don't care.
What are we doing?
They're not here, so who cares? They're in trouble, but the Wasp is fine, and she, instead of helping out the rest of the Avengers, she's just here. And then they pan back, and Absorbing Man and Titania are in a different hotel room, and it's less nice, and Titania comments on the fact that it's less nice. You get a little bit of her backstory real quick in case you forgot who she was, like most people, because her origin is from Secret Wars and nobody read Secret Wars besides us. And it talks about how Dr. Doom gave her powers. She was just like a random nobody, and then he made her the strongest woman on Earth. And how Spider-Man was the only person to ever defeat her. So she decides that to overcome her fear, someone needs to kill Spider-Man, and it's not going to be her, so she's going to try to convince her boyfriend, or manipulate her boyfriend to kill Spider-Man for him. Then we quickly pan over, and Spider-Man / Peter Parker is going to visit his not-girlfriend, Mary Jane, and literally... So he's in the Kingsley Limited building where Mary Jane does her modeling, and he's going to pick her up. And he doesn't understand why his spider sense is still going off. Like, Peter, maybe you should check. But it turns out in the room just to the left, Jack-o'-lantern, or not Jack-o'-lantern, sorry, the Hobgoblin.
Yes.
Is threatening. Who is this guy?
Roderick
Kingsley, who
right.
I didn't know had white hair, but because he previously was a brunette. But okay, maybe it's just a recolor issue.
That's all explained later, but I won't reveal it.
But yeah, so he's like threatening him. He's like, you gotta make me more pumpkin bombs. These pumpkin bombs are shit. Make me better ones. Spider-Man's not gonna die from regular pumpkin bombs. So Peter and Mary Jane are out to lunch. They're talking about Spider-Man related things, and you could tell that they're whispering about it, and then they're holding hands, and it's really cute and romantic. And then Peter's like, oh crap, the Avengers are out of commission, because there was apparently the news on the radio was talking about how the Avengers are out of commission, which I feel like should not be broadcast, but okay. hey, the world's greatest superheroes aren't available. So now Spider-Man feels even more responsible for absorbing Man and Titania, so he goes to where he knows that they were going to meet up. Apparently they're pretending to be chauffeurs to pick up somebody else from their Masters of Evil shenanigans, and so Titania was like, oh, there's Spider-Man. Cool, I can make Crusher kill him. So she gets out of her disguise and throws another car at him, because that's her signature, is throwing cars at Spider-Man. Love it. And then Crusher's like, oh my god, my girlfriend's so crazy, like, why would you do this? And he's like, well, I guess I'll help her. So then he starts fighting Spider-Man, and then they're fighting Spider-Man in this airport. And then the guy that they're supposed to meet up with, who we'll talk about later, who could it be? The man with the teeth, is like, where's my entourage? I was promised a limo. This is ridiculous. So they throw more vehicles at Spider-Man until Spider-Man is just fighting Titania because she's like, oh no, my boyfriend. And that's the thing that makes her over her fear of Spider-Man, is that Spider-Man was going to defeat Crusher. Which, probably not, but okay. So then Crusher absorbs a plane and also lifts a plane. And he's like, hey, Spider-Man, give up now or I'll throw this whole plane full of people. And presumably they'll all die. So Spider-Man's like, all right, you win, and just leaves. And everyone's like, wow, what a coward, Spider-Man. Literally everyone's talking about what a coward Spider-Man is. And then it's in the Bugle the next day, where Flash Thompson sees it, and he's like, Spider-Man's not a coward. Or maybe he is, like me. And then the issue ends.
He's hiding behind the same dumpster.
He's still there.
He's just been crouched behind this dumpster and nobody's found him for a week.
So
I guess, why would you check behind the dumpster? Oh, but the next issue, we got Hobgoblin, Jack-O-Lantern, Hammerhead, Silvermane, and the Rose, because there wasn't enough freaking bad guys in here. Let's throw in Hammerhead and Silvermane.
I'll just say that I think that Amazing's been coasting a little bit lately. Like, again, this is kind of just more fighting back and forth and, subplotting, and okay, it's fine and dandy. However, I did like the way that the story kind of climaxed with Absorbing Man holding up the plane. Again, using everyone as a hostage, and the fact that he basically defeated Spider-Man and Spider-Man had to walk away. I thought that was really cool. And I liked all the red herrings with the different hobgoblin suspects. So kind of an average issue of Amazing, but there's enough good in there that I did like it. Josh, what did you think?
I liked all of the separate set pieces on their own, but I don't think it worked as a whole story necessarily. It kind of almost felt like the Spectacular Spider-Man thing, where it's like they have all of these subplots that are just kind of stacked up on top of each other to fill out an issue, but they don't all necessarily blend together. It kind of felt like that a little bit, but I did like a lot of the stuff. I think the Titania and Absorbing Man relationship is really fun. The two of them teaming up to stop him, and then it all coming to a head at the airport is super fun. Both of their obsessions with throwing cars at Spider-Man is fantastic. Yeah, I had more fun reading this one, but I felt like it was a weaker overall story, if that makes sense.
Sure, yep.
But I'll forgive it because it was fun, right?
Right. Then Amazing's always fun. It always feels like classic Spidey to me. Bex Luthor, what'd you think?
I loved it, but only because I love Merrick McFerrin's and Crusher Creel's beautiful romance, and I love how much that they work together, and they're still together to this day in continuity.
Really? Oh,
absolutely.
Nice.
Oh my god, yes. No, this is the longest standing relationship. Nothing can break these two apart, and it's beautiful. And they're both just shitty B tier bad guys, and they just rob jewelry stores and work for the highest bidder, and I love them. And I love their their romance, where they were just hiding out in hotels, and Crusher's like, you're robbing jewelry stores again, come on. And it's actually a nice relationship. They seem to actually generally care about each other, even though Titania's trying to manipulate Crusher to kill Spider-Man for her, but then she saves him. it was nice, and I like Absorbing Man and Titania as characters. I think they're really interesting. I would honestly read a comic series that was just following them and their weird like couple dynamics.
Right, like they're what's it called? Famous movie with the two people on the run, killing people and robbing banks. Bonnie and Clyde. Like they're kind of Bonnie and Clyde relationship.
Yeah, but they just throw cars. Like they don't use guns.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. Michelle, what's your take on this one?
I actually liked it for the same reason Bex Luthor did. Like, I love their relationship was so cute and like wholesome. It was like weird because they're villains, but like they were very. I'm like, man, I want a relationship like they have. Very supportive of each other's endeavors and got each other's back, and like they're just. I don't know. I was like totally thrown off when she ran into the hotel room and jumped on him. Like just the way that entire thing played out. Like it was just like kind of like realistic of like a relationship. It wasn't like. It was just a small little nice moment between two people. Like, oh, you're so happy to see her when she came back. I was like, oh, that's cute. Like, they're villains, but, like, they're not, like, huge villains. They're, like she was saying, they're, like, more, like, just robbing banks and stuff. Like, is that really that bad? I mean, maybe capitalism kind of sucks anyways. Fuck them. So, I liked that. I liked that aspect of it. I kind of wasn't super into like the who's a hobgoblin thing. Like that was a lot less interesting to me, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't. It seemed less interesting than the actual stuff they were focusing on. Like I guess like the B plot was less interesting than the A plot.
Sure.
I did like the big splash panel when Absorb Man was like holding up that plane. Like in the background, and then Spider-Man was in the front, like turning. I thought that was a really, really, really cool panel. Like I was like, that'd be a cool poster or something, But yeah, I like the relationship aspect of it, and the rest of it, I could take or leave. It wasn't bad, but I didn't grab my interest as much.
So I know you said you didn't care about the Hobgoblin subplot, but I have to ask, who do you think is the Hobgoblin, or do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
I
don't know.
All right.
I was still in the dark.
The writers are doing the job then, because you've got...
Yeah, I was actually going to look it up. I forgot. I was going to look it up after to see who it was, because I was, like, nosy. And then, like, I was at work, and I was like, I got distracted, but... Well, now I'm going to look it up after this podcast over.
We can't spoil it for our listeners.
No.
Go ahead, Josh.
To me, it almost feels like they don't know who the Hobgoblin is, though. Like, it's written... It's written as if... They're kind of putting out a bunch of options, and then whoever people least suspect is who they're probably going to go for.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if you in a few months you're going to see how this story pans out, and it would lend some credence to your theory. Mm-hmm. You are not going to believe how this story turns out, but we'll leave it for later. Mm-hmm. But anyway, again, I thought this was an okay issue. I actually like the Hobgoblin stuff the best. I like the relationship between Titania and Absorbing Man, but I guess I didn't care as much as Becca and Michelle. I like the Hobgoblin stuff more. But overall, it was a fun issue. Kind of a typical issue of Amazing, right? It's always solid. I guess I recommend... Well, it's always okay. But I guess I recommend it. It's not a masterpiece, but I recommend it. Josh, what were you going to say?
I think the reason why I'm not as big of a fan of the like Hobgoblin mystery is because we're not seeing Peter Parker uncover clues, find clues as to who it might be. We're just being fed like red herrings, right? Like this isn't like him trying to figure it out and like solving. You trying to like clear his friend's name. At this point, he's kind of just like forgot about it and doesn't care. I don't think he mentioned it even in this one. Like Flash still on the run. Mm-hmm. I've got to clear his name because I still don't think he did it. Like it's very weird that we're just being told like, hey, look at this guy. Remember him? Maybe it's him. You never know. Mm-hmm. Ooh, what about this one? Like you remember that guy? He's kind of looking suspicious. It's like we don't ever see like. The only reason we suspect these people is because they tell us to. They tell us that he's a suspect, right? So,
right.
I definitely enjoyed the relationship more in this issue, just because there's like some substance there. The characters are doing something. They're interacting with each other, and I feel like that plot has gone forward. Their relationship is like moved. Something's happened. Where with the other guys, it's just kind of like a guess who board. I'm just looking at who's left.
Bex Luthor, did you recommend it yet? Or did you give a recommendation?
Yeah, no, for sure. I enjoyed it a lot. I love little things like this. This is why I read comic books. It's not for the punching, even though I love the punching, but it's just for like, oh, what's Titania and Absorb Man? What's their life like? Oh, they're married? That's cool. Oh, Crusher has a son, and Titania's his stepmom, and they just have like a nice, not nuclear family, and it's sweet and nice, and sometimes they rob banks and throw cars at Spider-Man. Like, I like that. That's my kind of jam. I also like the art in this. Michelle said that the big panel with like the plane would make a great poster. That's what I'm talking about. Is every issue there's at least one panel where you're like, that's freaking awesome, and that's that one. And even like a couple pages earlier when Spider-Man's fighting Absorbing Man, and there's like a million Spider-Mans to showcase how fast he is. I love the art. Yeah, I really like it. Yeah, no. Yeah. Read this one. Don't read the other one.
Yeah, it's just so we can tell everybody, it's the regular series artist, Ron Frenz, but it's inked by Bob Layton. So he's inked some of the issues, but he's not the usual inker. So yeah, it's definitely cool. And then Michelle, do you recommend this one?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, even like with the Hobgoblin thing, and the Hobgoblin thing wasn't necessarily bad. It's just in comparison to the other story, it was less interesting. There wasn't enough sense of urgency, in my opinion, towards it. So, but I would definitely recommend it just for the art and like the little fun relationship stuff going on in it.
Awesome. All right, there you go. Amazing Spider-Man 283. Now we're going to jump to Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 121. And Michelle, you are going to summarize this one for us.
I forgot, like, I had to, like, summarize stuff, so, like, I didn't write, like, a whole lot of things
down.
you
know what? Oh, you have to write anything. Trust me, we just go off the cuff, yeah.
I can just, it's basically, okay, like, I super love the cover of this one, because Jonah Jameson with a fucking gun is amazing.
Yeah,
it was, like, the most hilarious cover to me. I was like, what? Like, before when I actually started reading the story, I was like, what is, like, how did this even happen, like, this story? But basically, it starts off, like, they're... Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Jonah Jameson are like in a restaurant bar type of a thing, and they're enjoying a meal together. Jonah's been knocking them back. He's been having beer. Peter Parker's having Cokes, and they come. One of the guys that works at the newsroom comes in and was like, "Oh, like a bank got robbed, and I heard you guys were there." Like, I mean, he's like, and usually if you ask eyewitnesses, they don't give good, accounts. But, you guys that's your, let me ask you, what happened at this bank robbery? That Spider-Man showed up. And he's like, hey, Peter Parker, did you get any good pictures? And of course he didn't, because he was Spider-Man. So, so they, like, and you said this earlier before we started taping. I wrote this down on my book. I wrote, Rashomon. Right there, I was like, hey, this is Rashomon.
Yep. Now, did you notice the bank was called Rashomon?
No, I didn't.
Oh, they actually say, you mean the robbery at the Rashomon Bank and Trust just downstairs in the view? That was on page 3, yep. Or page 2.
I'm confused. What's Rashomon?
It's a film directed by Akira Kurosawa, where basically it's like a samurai era film where a murder takes place, and they try to find out what happened. And the murder is recounted by 3 different characters, and the different characters have different viewpoints of what happened. And it kind of never really tells you which one also is correct, which is interesting. It's all like perception and how perception changes reality for each person, and how one situation can be interpreted so different by everybody's like life experience and like their motivations behind why they're saying certain things. It's like basically the idea of like exploring one event through 3 different perspectives. It's like an absolutely fantastic film. Just fucking mwah, mwah. Just you need to watch it. It's like really good. Well, anyway, but that's like a really popular. It like basically popularized that trope of like events, and then everybody recounts it different, and then and when each character recounts it, it like shows their personality. about how they see the world. So it's like, you can kind of like look into like how characters, inner workings are. So that's what this does. Basically, all three of the characters, Mary Jane, Peter Parker, and Jonah Jameson, tell the story of what happened three different ways. And each one, the person telling the story has embellished on it to make themselves look better. And I would assume Peter Parker, being the way he is, that his version is the closest to what actually really happened. I guess that's what they're trying to say. But Jonah Jameson makes himself out to be like this badass flipping backwards over desks and shooting guns, and he's smoking cigars, and everybody's like, "Oh, Jonah Jameson, your cigar smells so good, like it's so hot." And then when Mary Jane tells the story, everybody's like just like ravished by her beauty, and oh, Mary Jane, you're beautiful, and everything's kind of revolving around her. And Peter Parker's story is very just like, this is what happened, guys, like, and it's funny because even like the characters in the story, like the person that tries to rob the bank looks different in each of their recollections. Like, and then the final one, you find out that he wasn't this like badass thug that come in. He was just kind of like this kind of Poindexter kind of guy that is super into Spider-Man beating him up too, like fetishy almost, like, which I was actually surprised by. He was like, "Yes, beat me, daddy, harder," kind of thing. And Spider-Man's like, whoa, I don't know, man. Like, but Spider-Man like feels sorry for him because he's such like he's like a dork, and I'm sure he has affinity with the dorks because he's also kind of a dork. So he kind of like protects the guy's identity because he could tell he wasn't like a professional criminal. He was just like looking for some kind of like validation or something, and maybe get his butt smacked around by Spider-Man on the DL or something. But and then that's the end of it. They're just like, oh, this is the three different kind of stories, and whose is more correct? It's probably Peter Parker's because his seems to be the most balanced out of all of them.
So, did you enjoy this issue, Michelle?
Oh yeah, this was my favorite one out of all three of them. I loved this one. I thought it was just fabulous. Like, it was just like really clever, and it was like really funny and ironic, and it was also kind of like a parody of Spider-Man in general. Like, they would kind of use it to like parody other issues of like the setup of a Spider-Man story, and like maybe the different ways that people describe Spider-Man stories. Like, that if they don't read them all the time, they're like, oh, he just does this and this and this. So it was kind of like a send off of that, maybe.
Yeah, I really like this issue. It's definitely my favorite of the bunch. And when I was a kid, obviously, I didn't know what Rashomon was, but I thought, oh my God, Peter David's invented a new genre. I didn't realize he got it from a movie. But yeah, this has been done in like, The Usual Suspects and a bunch of other different movies. But what a clever way to tell this story. And also, I just love the way it focuses on like just the main cast of the Daily Bugle, right? J. Jonah Jameson, not Mary Jane, but she doesn't work there. But Peter, and then Joe Robertson. I think that was so cool. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they actually use several different artists in this story as well. Ideally, each artist would have matched up to each story, but I don't think they quite do. But if you go through the issue, you can kind of see, like, the opening splash page is John Romita Sr., like the quintessential Spider-Man artist. And it's just a classic shot of them all sitting there. And then as you go forward, there's a couple pages by John Buscema, who's another Marvel veteran. And then when it gets to, I think it's J. Jonah Jameson's point of view, it's Bob McLeod, who's known for doing New Mutants as well as for doing Spider-Man. And his artwork is the funniest, where like J. Jonah Jameson is doing his flip over the table and he's still got his cigar in his mouth. Like, that was hilarious.
I had assumed that was on purpose, right? Like they were utilizing the fact that they have like a bullpen of different artists to like have different styles for the way each story is told. So I really like that.
Yes.
Yeah, this was super fun and creative. And although the idea itself isn't necessarily like super original, I think that having it told in this way and in comics is really great. This is like the perfect way to have a one-off story. Yes. Like if you compare this to the first issue that we talked about, Web, it's like night and day. I think like this story, even though like nothing necessarily changes from the start to the end, it doesn't further the overarching story. you still get something from it. Like you're still being told a story, and you're learning more about these characters. I absolutely had so much fun with this one.
I think you hit on something really important. I know that like people tend to think that the only way a story is good is if something changes, if things are radically changed forever, and blah. But you're right. There's another way to tell a good story, and that's to just to learn more about the characters, right? And especially in this story where you find out how different each of the three main characters is, and I think that is the key to what makes this work. I think it's really good. Yeah. Bex Luthor, what'd you think?
No, yeah, this one was my favorite of the three too. I had no idea. I don't watch movies, right? So I don't know anything about movies. So it was actually, I learned something today, so that's fun. Also, my partner loves samurais, so probably actually watch the movie. The three perspectives is great. I love learning more. Like, you just learn so much about the three people. Like, I didn't realize, well, I knew Mary Jane was vain, but I didn't realize she maybe could be that vain. Jay Jonah's full of himself, but, like, the fact that he would go out of his way, be like, yeah, I did a backflip, and expect people to believe him is insane.
Right.
And then you have Peter's story, and in the previous two, they're, like, hyping themselves up as the hero, right? Whereas in Peter's story, Spider-Man's the hero, right? And it's not Peter. And Peter has to tell it as if he's not, like, it's an interesting, because if Peter was telling this as Spider-Man, it probably would have been different still than him telling it as Peter Parker. Because he has to make sure that the people he's telling it to don't get any clue that he's Spider-Man. So he can't be like, and then Spider-Man did this dope thing. He has to be like, and then Spider-Man did this thing. And, like, I got it from the retelling that he isn't just being like, oh, Spider-Man's so quippy, what a guy. Like, I just enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the reveal that the guy is, like, just this, like, mentally ill man who's just begging for forgiveness. He seems like he's lost.
Is that
completely?
See, I also took that as Peter trying to downplay that Spider-Man did anything, like, heroic. So something wouldn't get published, right? Like, oh, it was just this, like, dorky guy who's wearing Howard the Duck shirt. Like, it wasn't much of a fight. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. That's at least that's what I took.
He wanted to protect that guy's identity. That's why he downplayed it. So, like, because he felt like that guy didn't really deserve the ire. Like, he was just he felt sorry for him, and so he kind of wanted to keep it, like, more on the DL.
Well, also, it's the second issue this month where Peter Parker kind of talked someone down, right? Even in the fill-in story, Peter Parker kind of explained to that guy that was out to get him, like, listen, I don't remember how he did it, but if you remember, he kind of negotiated with the guy, right? And sort of convinced him to do the right thing, and that's the same thing that happened here, which I thought was, again, really telling, right? Like, it reveals Peter Parker's character. So I thought that was really cool.
The issue of Amazing, there was fighting, but it didn't end with a fight. It ended with Peter walking away from a fight.
True. Yep. Good point.
A lot of good conflict resolution this week.
De-escalation. Yeah, definitely. You're right.
Ugh, and the art in this, I could talk about it all day.
Do it.
I love some of this, especially with the Peter retelling. And, like, just that Spider-Man, that muscly blue, like, ugh. Exactly. That's how I feel about it.
You know what's funny? Now that you mention it, you're right. Spider-Man in the Spider-Man story is done in the kind of blue style with the black shadows. And then the first couple chapters, Spider-Man is all... Well, actually, no, only the middle one. It's the middle one by Bob McLeod where he's solid black. So that's kind of interesting, too.
Well, it's supposed to be from JJ's perspective, right? So it seems almost like less heroic. Like he's less defined, muscly, like muscle-wise.
More insect-like, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think we mentioned how the woman that gets shot... in J. Jonah Jameson's chapter, Spider-Man just jumps over her, whoops, slow bridge, and just leaves her laying there bleeding to death. Like, there's so many funny moments in that one. In the JJ, like, that was my favorite one.
One of them, she got shot in the chest, and then the other one, she only got grazed in the arm, right?
Right. Yes.
So, like, did she die in one, and then, like, in the other one, she just was, like, slightly harmed?
I think in Mary Jane one, she's shot like in the chest. But anyway, sorry, Becca.
And then, no, even in Mary Jane's one, she's like way more fashionable.
Good point.
She's like high fashion girl, and then in J. Jonah, she's just some lady.
Yep.
That gets shot.
Totally different outfit. You're right.
Totally different outfit. And then in Peter's version of the story, she's also in a different outfit, but she just her arm gets grazed, and even mentions she's like, oh no, I'm fine. It just stings a bit.
Right. Yep.
She probably had a high fashion outfit on, and Mary Jane noticed because she notices stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like guys kind of don't. So it just was like clothes to everybody else. But Mary Jane's like, oh, that's a shirt from this and a skirt from here, and.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because she's blonde in Mary Jane and Peter's retelling, but she's not blonde in J. Jonah's retelling. But also,
I never noticed that. Yeah,
she's not wearing a shirt. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. Obviously J. Jonah is like, oh, a woman was shot, so she's wearing a skirt because she's a woman.
It also just goes to show that he's the least reliable when it comes to retelling the story. It's he's getting so much wrong that even Peter and MJ's stories kind of match up a little bit, but his is just so ridiculous and wild and out there that he's
also drunk too.
True.
They make
a
show of him being pretty drunk. He was smoking a pretzel.
Yes.
Right.
And Peter's the only one drinking Coke, right?
Yeah, they make a note of saying that he's on his third Coke.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about this. I mean, we all love it. I mean, obviously, I give it my highest recommendation. It's one of my favorite issues lately for sure. It's a classic story. Again, it's something we've definitely never seen in Spider-Man, as far as I can remember, right?
Yeah, no, nothing like this. This is super fun. I think the best one-off story that we've dealt with for sure. One of the more fun ones, it's up there in my favorites that we've reviewed on the podcast.
And definitely,
for sure.
This is I wish more one-offs were like this, right? Because you could fit this in at any point, and it would fit perfectly, seamlessly, right? So, yeah, definitely a good issue. Michelle, what do you think? Recommend it?
Oh yeah, totally. This was fantastic, and it would be fun to do as a dual thing, watch Rashomon and then read this comic, and it'd be a fun little thing. It's always fun when you watch a lot of classic things, and then you see it pop up in popular culture, and it's just fun when that happens. I didn't notice a lot of it when I was younger. When I was my teens, I would read comics, and I reread them as an adult, and I was like, oh yeah, they totally saw this Czechoslovakian film from 1950. I just never, because they were all old guys, to me when they wrote it. So it's just funny how a lot of that. It's kind of a good example of that is I watched Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and then I didn't realize until I was in my 30s that it's the Seventh Seal or
right, yeah.
It's a Bergman reference. I was like, what the fuck? It blew my mind. I was like,
yes, yes.
They totally a Bergman homage, and I never, it's fun when that kind of stuff happens. This is a really fun way to do that too.
Absolutely. Bex Luthor, what do you think?
I was gonna say I do that with anime. I'll be watching some Western stuff. I'll be like, that's from Evangelion.
Yep.
Yeah. I can't count how many times they reference the motorcycle Akira slide.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
there's a
Yeah.
GIF that does that. It shows them all in a row, right, or something. It's so cool. So,
but yeah, just the weeb version of Michelle's much more educated version. Is me going, I know that. That's
But I also get excited about the Kira bike too.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck yeah, Kira slide.
We all like anime.
Becca, did you give your recommendation? Yeah? All right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And from the only person here who had no idea that it was a reference to something, I still enjoyed it. And knowing that it is a reference to something very influential, apparently, makes me actually like it more. And also want to delve into what it was inspired from. I like doing that kind of stuff. That's always fun. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I will say, this cover is dope. and it's so dope that I just bought it.
Oh.
Oh.
It is
What do you
cool.
mean? You bought the digital issue?
No. The physical one's sitting in my living room right now.
Oh, okay.
That's
Where did you get it
awesome.
from?
There's this place called Capcam. Shout out to Capcam. Every couple days they get like tons and tons and tons of comics all the time. And they're mostly like a digital store. So my partner, who is constantly just looking at their new uploads, is like, that's a cool cover, and bought it. And then when it got here, I was like, hey, I just read that.
That's so cool.
That's
nice.
amazing.
It's like, I wish you would have told me you were buying it so I would have read the physical one. But
I didn't. I
nope.
can reread it.
it's bagged and boarded and put in a box to be never touched again.
There you go.
Like art
invested
should
in.
be.
Right. So everyone's given the recommendation, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's it. It's too bad. I wish this episode could go on longer, but we're all out of comic books.
Thank God.
I want to thank Michelle for joining us again. Thank you, Michelle.
All right, thanks for inviting me back on.
Absolutely, and we'll definitely have you on again soon, for sure, as long as you are up for it.
As long as I remember to.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, anytime.
This week was much better anyway.
Yeah, you lucked out, I think.
It's funny because if I could, I would have every guest we've ever had on for our big Hobgoblin reveal episode, because it'll be so cool for everyone to see how. Actually, no, it won't, because it's pretty terrible how they resolve it. But
Yeah, I was like, it's not going to be cool.
Yeah.
You're going to have a bunch of disappointed friends.
It's not a cool revelation. Everybody's going to go, oh. Or,
it's
who?
like,
Who's that guy?
Wait, who?
before Game of Thrones and before Lost, there was the big Hobgoblin reveal, the big disappointment. But we'll talk about that later.
I mean, I would have said, yeah, I guess, what else, right?
Hobgoblin was purgatory the entire time.
Like, oh my god, you said purgatory, and I immediately was like the devil girl? No, not Rebecca. Rebecca, not the devil girl with the big boobs. Not her. The place.
So,
I
be
gotta
sure
stop
to...
reading so much comics. Freak.
No, you don't. But anyway, be sure to join us next week. We're reviewing Web of Spider-Man 22 with the continuation of the Dublin story. Amazing Spider-Man 284, which begins the Gang War 5-parter. And Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man 122, with the return of, who's this guy? Mahler, I think? I don't know, but I'm sure it's a good issue. And anyway, Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCT Spidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the comics and the podcast itself. We want to keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, see you later.